Coming out tonight. How many people were at results a couple weeks ago? Okay, so a lot of you guys. So you kind of already heard a little bit of the spiel. Today we're going to go into a little bit more detail on some of the lower quarter injuries that you might experience as you go through your training. And then we'll talk about some ways that you can stretch, strengthen to prevent those injuries. We'll go into a whole bunch of different stuff on screening and how that can be a benefit to you guys as well. I'm Dan, this is Leslie. We're both physical therapists at Results. A little bit more about me. I studied at San Francisco State for undergrad, went to Sac State for PT school, graduated in 2011. I went on a long-term internship at Fleet Feet Performance. Anybody heard of Fleet Performance or Exos? It's a huge training facility, one of the top training facilities in the United States. Dr. James Andrews, who does a lot of knee surgeries, like Robert Griffin III, I think he did Brett Favre's elbow a couple times. But we were connected kind of to that facility. So it was kind of cool because we had the orthopedic surgeon, the physical therapist, we had strength coaches, we had skills coaches, we had nutritionists, massage therapists. So it was a really good way to learn how to communicate with a whole bunch of different healthcare professionals to get the athletes to their optimal form and returning from injury. From then, I became a certified strength and conditioning specialist, USAW weightlifting certification, so progressing people back to after injury into Olympic lifting. Functional movement screen certified, which we'll talk about a little bit more about what that is and how that can benefit you guys. And then I also wrote a little ebook on like a self-screen, how you can screen for yourself and determine areas of tightness and weakness throughout your body and some corrective exercises for that. Some of that stuff you guys will see in here too, so that's just kind of my background and where I'm coming from. So just think I'm some guy up here talking about this stuff. Results, physical therapy. Those of you who weren't there, anybody else heard of Results before? Yeah, a couple of you guys. So we're located off of Highway 50 in Bradshaw. We also have another location in Carmichael, which Leslie works at, and then one more in Rancho Marietta. So we have 3 locations around the Sacramento region. We work with some of the top professional sports teams in Sacramento. We do all of the rehab and strength conditioning for Sac State. The San Francisco Giants, we've become a partner with them and the River Cats since the Giants turned over into the River Cats from the A's. The Sacramento Republic FC, anybody been in those games? Oh, they're pretty fun, huh? Yeah. You got the fans cheering loud. It's a really good vibe. We do all of their rehab and all their strength and conditioning as well. We have a guy who's TPI certified, so we do a lot of professional golf like certification of screens. And then our newest relationship with the Sacramento Running Association, we're starting to do a little bit more with the elite team. So we're doing some physical therapy, some screening things that you guys will see too with the Sacramento Running Association Elite. And then Fleet Feet, we've been with Fleet Feet, I think, for about 2.5 years now. Leslie actually does the screening and the running analysis out of the store here in the back once a month. So if that's something you guys are interested in, we can talk about that a little bit too. But while we're here today, we're going to talk about the most common types of injuries that may occur in the lower extremities, some risk factors for these injuries and how we can prevent these injuries from happening to begin with. The importance of screening, and we'll go over the FMS and some running biomechanical analysis and why that can be beneficial to you guys. And also talk about injury management. We have a slide in here, but about 20 to 80% of first-time runners in marathon training will get injured at some point. It may not be a devastating injury, but it may be some little things that you're dealing with, and we can talk about how we can help you guys with that. So what's the big deal? Why are we talking about this? Running, there's been an increase in recreational running over the past 15, 20 years. So more people are doing it. It's an easy form of exercise, fitness. You don't need a gym. You don't need a basketball or football to go play. You can just get outside, put your shoes on, and go, right? But that's also the problem too, because people think they can just get up and go instead of doing the proper warm-ups and cool downs and all that stuff. The injury risk, like we said, is between 20 and 80% for a first-time marathoner going through training. And then a little bit about chronic versus acute injury. Anybody know the difference between chronic versus acute? So acute is like you walk outside and you roll your ankle, right? That happens and there's a traumatic injury to it. Or you're running and you take a wrong step and you feel a pop in your knee. That's an acute injury. Not many running injuries are acute injuries. They're not really devastating where you feel a pop or a pull or anything like that. It's more chronic. So even if you start developing some knee issue, the chances are you've had that knee issue for a while, but now it's starting to become symptomatic. And maybe there's some other issues going on that may be causing that knee to flare up on you. That's kind of what we're here to talk about. The one reason injury is so devastating is because it leads to inactivity. Runners love to run, right? If you can't run, usually it's your form of release. So if you can't run, it leads to isolation, depression. You could go down a really bad path. So we don't want that for anybody, and we see that a lot in all sports, not just running. Millions of dollars are spent per year on doctor's visits, orthotics, foam rollers, different types of supplements. So we want to make sure that you guys are taking all the proper precautions before going to running so that we're not spending, kind of wasting all this money. So location of injury. What do you guys think the number, I think you guys probably saw number 1. How about the number 2 most common region of the body that's injured during running? This is running specific injury. Nobody. We got like shoulder, neck, hip, knee, foot. Foot and ankle. Foot and ankle is the number 2. The knee is number 1. It's not even close. About 43% of all injuries in the runner are running injuries. This is an older study in 2002, but it was one of the best studies that came out because they took a huge group. It was like 1,000 runners, and they all went through the CIM training. They followed every single runner. Coaches actually followed the runners to see who got injured and what type of injury they had, how long they were out, how long it took them to come back. So though this is an older study, it's probably one of the best that have come out to assess the runner injury and location of the injury. The lower leg, so that can be anywhere between the knee and the ankle, is the 3rd. Hip and pelvis, followed by Achilles and calf injuries. Upper leg, like thigh or hamstring, a little bit lower, and lower back, the least common injury.
What's the IT band?
IT band. So the IT band is this little band of tissue. It's almost like connective tissue. It's not a muscle at all.
Where is it on that chart?
IT band would fall underneath. So IT band is going to be anything around the knee. On this next slide, we're going to talk about what type of injuries. So these are just the location of the injuries. So the most common pathologies would be IT band would fall under that category. It's the second most common. Anybody see what the red and gray mean? Women. What the heck is up with that? Huh? And I'll tell you, women tend to have biomechanically a little bit different pelvis than males. So they tend to be wider, which means it's a little bit harder for the hip musculature to control what the hip, knee, pelvis is doing. So women have to be a lot stronger than males in order to not get injured. And we're going to talk about some of the key areas that you're going to want to target in order to not get injured. Yes?
Talk about the IT band, but finish with the IT band.
So the IT band starts up at your hip, actually. There's a lot of acronyms, but the TFL, tensor fascia lata, is a muscle like right here. So everyone feel the hip bone on the side? You feel that? Come up and like towards your groin, and that's where that TFL muscle is. A lot of you guys will probably be sore right there, right? That's not a good thing. Yeah, so if that muscle is tight, it's attached to your IT band. The IT band is more like connective tissue. You can think of it more as a tendon than a muscle. It comes all the way down the lateral side of your leg and attaches in the outside part of your knee. So right up over here, kind of the bony prominence on the outside part of your knee, okay? A lot of the times with the repetitive running, like the flexion and extension, it can kind of rub or compress that IT band into the bone. It can cause some soreness. You also have a little sac of fluid that's underneath that band that protects it from rubbing on the bone. Sometimes that can get inflamed too and cause IT band symptoms there as well, okay? Anybody ever had that before? It sucks. I've had it too. I'm dealing with a little bit of it right now, but I know how to treat it. You guys are going to know how to treat it. Yep.
What's the muscle right below the hip bone? Because I can roll on that. I just roll over like this.
Right below here?
Yeah.
So you have your IT band right there.
Okay.
So there's nothing underneath that. It's all like tendon. So if you just roll that, it's going to hurt like hell, and it's not really going to do much for you. You can't really stretch the IT band. It's more of a connective tissue. Now what we can do is we can roll the lateral quad, which is attached to the IT band, and your lateral hamstring. So you want to go kind of around that IT band. If you roll it, it's just going to hurt, and you're not going to go anywhere. You can also release that TFL, which some of you pressed and it was really tender, and that's going to help release your IT band too. Okay, so everyone can put their hand up. You guys can work on that. Patellofemoral pain. Anybody know what patellofemoral pain is? Oh shoot, there we go. So the patella is your kneecap, right? Patellofemoral pain or patellofemoral syndrome is anything around your kneecap. It's like a general category. You can have pain on the inside, pain on the outside, pain underneath, pain on top, anything around the kneecap. Patellar tendinopathy is just either tendonitis or tendinosis of the patellar tendon, which is right below your kneecap. So sometimes that can be really sore. Running is more of a quad dominant activity. So sometimes you can put too much miles on too fast and cause a little irritation in that tendon. Plantar fasciitis, anybody? Yeah, so plantar fasciitis, it's kind of, it's this connective tissue between your heel and your toes. So sometimes that can become really, really tight in some people and cause pain over time, becoming too tight. Or you can have really flat feet and you can kind of overly stretch it. So there's two different things that may be going on there. A lot of times your calf and Achilles are really tight with that. And then shin splints, anyone had shin splints before? Yeah, those suck too, right? Leslie's going to talk about some things that we look at in our running analysis that can lead to these shin splints, can lead to these different pathologies, okay? So risk factors. Previous injury is the number one risk factor. So for those of you guys have raised your hand, you said you had plantar fasciitis, you said you had IT band issues, your chances of getting injured again shoot up the roof just from having an injury. Your body mechanics change a little bit to avoid that pain, and it's always in the back of your body's mind, and it wants to kind of move around that. So a lot of what we do is kind of retrain the body, retrain the mind into not sensing pain so you can run it with normal mechanics and decrease your risk for injury after initial injury. Poor single leg stance control. So standing on one leg and being really wobbly, that's another risk factor. A lot of times that knee rotates in, and that's bad for a multitude of reasons. Novice runners, we talked about that. People who are beginning running tend to get hurt more than people who have been running for a while. And increasing intensity. Men over 40 miles per week, women over 30 miles per week. So if you guys are over that mileage, then your injury risk is going to go up as well. Just the more you're running, the more likely you are to occur an injury. Training for some type of event, marathon. Everyone wants to reach that goal, right? You want to stay on your training schedule. So sometimes you push yourself a little bit through some type of injury or some type of ache and pain. And then men, being under 34 years old, your chances of getting a knee injury are a lot higher than females or people at other ages. Women, BMI below 21 kilograms, you're at an increased risk injury. What do you guys think those people are at increased risk for injury? What type of injury? People who are super skinny and run a lot? Stress fractures, right. Sometimes they don't have the appropriate musculature and their bones may be a little bit weaker or a little bit frail, which can lead to these stress fractures. So, any questions about those things? No? Okay, Leslie's going to talk about some injury prevention techniques, kind of what we can do to decrease your risk for these type of injuries.
All right, so the biggest things are being prepared to even start running, which a lot of us aren't. We decide we want to do something, we sign up for an event, and boom, there we are. So we run into a lot of these things, but what you can do is rely on your coaches, your fellow runners. People have done it before you because they've probably gone through worse already. But being smart by preparing for the run, proper warm-up, which we'll go through, dynamic versus static stretching we'll talk a little bit about, developing your own specific strengthening and stretching routine. You'll figure out kind of what works best for your body. I know my calves get really tight, so I foam roll those as much as possible, but I kind of ignore my quads because they're fine. So you'll learn what you need to really address and what gets tight on you after a long run or after speed workout or a hill workout. That's part of the fun of running longer and longer, not necessarily just distance, but years, is you get to figure out your kind of weak points. Turn it into a game, it'll be a lot more fun. And then screening, so the stuff that we talk about later on with our functional movement screening, biomechanical analysis. If you're doing a stretching and strengthening routine, you feel like you're properly warming up, you're hydrating well, all that kind of stuff, and something's just still not right, that's when it's time to go take a look at it. So slow and steady, that would be, warm-up is dynamic.
Leslie's going to go over some demonstration of this stuff. It's kind of hard with a group this size to have everybody hop up and try this stuff. Most of you tried it when you were at the clinic a couple weeks ago, but the first move that we do, and the reason why we do more dynamic stretching opposed to static stretching, is when you do static stretching, you sit here and you stretch out for like 30 seconds up to a minute before going to run. You actually inhibit your muscles from firing quickly. So would you want to inhibit a muscle from firing quickly before you go run? No, right? Dynamic stretching actually increases your neuromuscular system response and how fast your muscles kind of respond to running. So that's why we do more dynamic now compared to static. Okay? So the first move is just pulling your knee up to your chest and then keeping that bottom knee nice and straight. So that's going to be a little stretch on the glutes and hamstrings. A little, we call it a cradle stretch, where you get more glute stretch from side to side there. You guys have this handout in front of you too if you want to follow along. A little quad stretch with an arm raise, lengthening everything in the anterior chain. So the next one's an inverted T. So this is getting a little, little hamstring stretch there, a little balance. Okay, we talked about how balance is so important. A little lunge and reach with a twist. So that gets a little hip flexor stretch there. A little lateral lunge, so that gets more groin and kind of inner hamstring stretch. And this is the sheet that you guys have in front of you. That bottom row, those first three on the bottom row, we call the world's greatest stretch. It's a multi-step stretch where you get a lot of different things going at the same time. The hand walks, we don't really recommend too much, but that's just kind of walking out with your hands to comfort. You don't have to go flat like this guy is. But coming back up, you really get an eccentric load on your hamstrings. So again, that stretches those a little bit too. Okay? So dynamic versus static. Now Liz is going to talk a little bit about static stretching and when that is appropriate.
Sorry.
Any questions? Yeah. Yeah.
For the dynamic stretches, so you just do one.
Yeah. So you do 5 on each leg. Sorry, that's not on the sheet. But yeah. So you do 1, 1.
We
2,
generally do it walking,
2.
but you can also do it in place. Like I've done it at the start of a race, just trying to stay warm, basically.
Yeah.
You can just do it in place, but we generally do it walking just to kind of keep it dynamic.
Cool. Any other questions about dynamic stretching? Yeah.
So when did they decide that dynamic stretching was better to do than all the stretching? Like when I was growing up playing soccer, we
Right.
just stretched out a lot. And everything.
Exactly. And when I was growing up too, and I played college basketball, we would sit in the middle of the court and we'd spread our legs or have a trainer come over here and he's stretching you out. How many people go to Kings games? Do you guys see what the trainers are doing in the middle of the court before the game? I like to get there like an hour early and see all that stuff. But I'm kind of weird. So what they're doing now is they're doing more of the dynamic stuff. So they get a guy and they come here and then come back. Come that way, come back. They have the bands on. They're activating hip musculature. They're doing like little core musculature. So it really has changed probably over the past 10 years is when more and more research started coming out showing that static stretching before events doesn't really benefit you playing a fast sport. So yeah, probably over the last 10 years or so, more and more research has started to come out about that. And they actually did a cool study where they took everybody and they got them, took a couple people, put them on the bike and had them spin for 5 minutes. They took another group, they did dynamic stretching. They took another group and did static stretching. And then there was one other where they did more like leg swings or like jumps. So what do you guys think increased flexibility the most out of those 4 groups? Dynamic, anybody else? The bike. Crazy, right? What that does is it increases your core temperature. So you heat your muscles from the inside out. And increasing the temperature of your muscles actually increases flexibility. You increase blood flow. You get nutrients into the muscle that allows it to be a little bit more flexible, right? So dynamic stretching may not increase, like I said, it may not increase your flexibility, but it increases your neuromuscular system, the timing of your muscles. When your foot hits the ground, how fast can your muscles respond? And that's what you want before going into an event. Cool? Anything else on dynamic? Yeah.
So at the registration, you want to do all, but you don't have a space and maybe you may not have a time.
Right.
So what's the minimum in the race? Like
That's a great question.
I've walked
Everybody
out my
asks that
door.
question.
I've walked out my door, and if it's cold, I'll do a little bit more, but I'll quick.
It's very quick. This thing,
Then I can be like, I did it. Okay, I'm ready.
no, this thing takes you 3 minutes max. Okay? You cut that bottom row out. Like I said, you guys don't really need that. You cut that bottom row out. It's 1, 2, 3. It's like 5 different movements. You're doing 5 on each leg, and they're quick. I mean, you're just going like this. So each movement may take you 30, 45 seconds each.
And if you consider that most of us are standing in line at the porta potty for 10 or 15
Oh yeah,
minutes,
that's right.
plenty
Instead of
time.
doing this, right? Sit there and do some of these. Sit there and do some of these. That'll be a lot more beneficial for you guys. Cool. All right. So
like we
static
talked
stretching.
about, static stretching, we say for the end. So this is part of your cool down. And the reason for that is like Dan talked about, it zaps your economy. So if you do this before you go, you've already kind of used up all that energy ready to go. So we do this at the end, and the reason being, like why do it at all, is that we just ran. So we spent all this time using our muscles, activating them, and now we're going to let them relax. So you know how you feel like after a long run, the next day, it's a little tight. Things are speaking to you. If you do this, I guarantee you will notice a difference. And it's just 30 to 60 seconds, 2 to 3 times per body part. And each one targets a specific thing, obviously. So our calf stretch, if you have Achilles issues, plantar fasciitis issues, this is your money maker. Hip flexor, a lot of us are more quad dominant when we run, so this helps open up that hip flexor, lets us activate our glute more during our run. The quad stretch, kind of self-explanatory. And then piriformis glute, a lot of us will have tight hips during our runs, and this one helps prevent that.
Is there a quad stretch that doesn't require me to be an Olympic gymnast?
That's a lot more comfortable than it looks. But I mean, you can even, as easy as standing here, it's not ideal because we like to do it lying flat to block basically compensations. Because a lot of people are going to do this and they're like, yeah, I'm stretching my quad. That's not doing anything for your quad. You can just do it lying flat too on the ground. You don't have to be on a table.
And sometimes we're stretching the quad because we have anterior knee pain, like patellofemoral stuff, patellar tendonitis. When you increase the bend of your knee, it also makes those structures a little bit more force going through those structures. So you shouldn't feel this in the knee when you're stretching your quad. You should feel it along the front side of your thigh. So getting in this position, that leg that's off the table, I know it kind of sucks being in that position, but that really sets your pelvis. Instead of doing a stretch like this, right, where I'm really stretching my lower back and probably causing some torque and twist in my lower spine, this allows you to be neutral spine, and it's not going to allow your quad and hip flexor to pull you into that extended position. The quad attaches to your pelvis. Hip bone's attached to the knee bone, right? So if you do this and your quad's really tight, you're going to pull your back into a hyperextension like that, and you're going to go for a run, and then your back's going to be tight. Well, yeah, you just stretched your back instead of stretching your quad. So these positions that we put you in are specific to target that specific muscle group. Okay. Yeah.
So like with the standing calf, like when we're out and we're done with our runs, we usually grab a curve.
That's perfect.
And use that.
That's
So
great.
Is that similar to?
That's perfect. That accomplishes the same goal.
So okay.
That accomplishes the same goal. Yeah. And you could do hands on the ground and butt up in the air to stretch out your calves too. It's another one that we typically tell people if they don't have anything to hold on to, or a curb or anything like that. Yes.
I've been doing some static stretching at night before I go to bed.
Okay.
I'm feeling pretty tight, and it seems like it's helping.
Yeah.
But is that bad?
No, heck no. No, it's completely fine. Yeah. At the end of the day, that's when you want to do your static stretching. And again, holding that ideal time, it's different. The younger we are, we don't need to hold it as long. The older we get, we need to hold it longer. So I usually tell people, whatever decade of life you're in, hold it for that long. If you're in your 30s, hold it 30 seconds. 40s, 50s, 60s. When you go past a minute, you don't really get an increased benefit of the flexibility. So a minute is kind of max. 2 to 3 times is ideal for each muscle group. Cool.
All right, and then we got strength training, so kind of the opposite end. Stretching is where you cool down and relax. Strength training is a couple days a week. We target specific things to runners. So we look at hip abductors and flexors, hip extensors, so that's that big thing. A lot of us lack that kick because we don't have any hip extension because we're all in our quads. So we focus a lot on that. Hamstrings and the spine stabilizers. We don't realize how much our spine is working when we're running, especially if we have some poor form happening and you see those runners who are kind of hunched over. Their back is working so hard. So we work on getting everyone strong, getting that good posture, so you're prepared to run. So we have just some basic stuff that we work on. We've kind of developed like a Runner's 6 type program where we focus on kind of the big hitters. So especially like that, for example, that side plank with a leg lift, that's the biggest glute med activation exercise you can do. So you get core, you get hip, you're working your shoulder, you get like this whole thing just by doing one exercise.
Can you clarify what glute med is?
This right here, so this supports you when you are standing on one leg. So a lot of runners that you see that kind of have this like hip drop thing, they have oblique hip abductor, this outside of their glute basically. So that's going to help you, that single leg stance, all that kind of stuff. More strengthening exercises. We like to incorporate balance as well, so that's why you'll see a lot of use of the Swiss balls. Why not get more bang for your buck? So you don't have to have that sort of thing to do these exercises. You can do a bridge on the ground, you can do mountain climbers on the ground, same thing with the single leg bridge. But if you have access to that equipment, it's a great addition. And then we do a lot of mini band work. Steamboats, for example, is a stabilizing exercise for that hip. You work your quad, your core, if you're moving fast enough, both sides at the same time. So
that's kind of the stretching and strengthening component, right? But like Leslie said earlier, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you're doing all the right things, stretching and strengthening wise, and then you go out for a run and you're still having some issues. And that's where the further screening is kind of required at that point, okay?
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, definitely.
On the strengthening, so the only one that you use weights is for the single leg?
the deadlift.
That's
In
it?
general, yeah.
So you don't do a lot of weight training?
We don't do a ton. I mean, when we have runners as patients, we'll obviously work on some stuff. But as far as a maintenance program for most runners, running is a body weight activity. And it's set up there, you know, we focus on 3 sets of around 15 to 20 reps. With a lot of our more strength-based athletes, we'll work on like 3 sets of 6 to 8 reps. They're working more on building strength and hypertrophy. We're working more on endurance. When we're running a marathon, we're running thousands of steps. So giving someone 3 sets of 10 and calling it good is not really gonna cut it. So that's why we start to work on more of that endurance-based stuff. And body weight is also easy. A lot of runners don't like cross training, so we can kind of trick them into it by not making them have a ton of equipment or use anything. You can just do this stuff in the morning or evening, whatever works.
If this stuff is easy, like if you get up to 20, 30, 40 reps and you're still like, oh, then you can start adding some weight to it, right? Then you can start loading your body a little bit more. But yeah, to start off and get a baseline, and especially if you're training, it depends on where you're at. Are you in the midst of your training? Are you in the second month of a 4-month training program? You don't really want to increase the weights that you're lifting, right? You kind of want to maintain. Pick your off season if you have a slower time of the year where you're not running or training as much. Then you can start adding a little bit more weights to your strengthening program. That's where you can build some bulk, build some muscle hypertrophy, size of the muscle. Does that answer?
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else on strengthening? Perfect. Okay, so screening. So the functional movement screen, there's a little video on both of these, so I'm going to kind of jam through these, but it's a series of 7 different movements. You get scored on each movement, and you come up with a total score. If you score a 14 or below out of 21, you're at an increased risk for injury. And we're going to go through a little video that's going to show you guys what it is. The running video analysis is slow motion treadmill analysis. So we actually take video of you running, slow it down, go over the deviations that we see, which Leslie's going to talk about a little bit later, and correct those right on the spot. 14 marker placement, we assess the deviations during your running form. Okay. So the functional movement screen, a lot more studies and research are coming out on the functional movement screen. Like I said, below a 14, you're at a significant increased risk for injury. They took a whole group of 100 runners, long distance runners, and they screened every single person. The people who didn't get hurt scored a 13 out of 21. The people who did get hurt scored much lower than that. Also, what they found too is, and you'll see in the video, the overhead squat and leg raise were 2 specific tests. If you scored poorly on those 2, then you're at increased risk for injury. There was another one that they did with a college track team, track and field, where they screened everybody and they watched their performance. So actually, did they get better throughout the season? And the number was over 50. If you scored over 15 out of 21, you actually increased your performance. So the higher you score, the more likely you are going to be to increase your times in running. So this is a little video here. With the functional movement screen, we take you through 7 different movements: an overhead squat, a hurdle step, a lunge, a hamstring flexibility test, a shoulder mobility test, linear stability test, and a rotary stability test. The runner gets objectively scored 0 out of 3 on each movement to come up with a composite score of 21. you score a 14 or below out of 21, then you're at an increased risk for injury. So it's a really great tool for us to determine injury risk. And also it gives us an opportunity to determine areas of weakness or tightness in the body and asymmetries from side to side. The running biomechanical analysis begins with the runner coming in the door, and then we have specific markers that we place on the runner's body, which helps us determine joint angles that we go over with the runner during the analysis portion.
So when you see those runners who are really upright, reaching out way in front of them, they're overstriding. What happens with that is that we end up basically putting the brakes on with every single step we take. So you've probably heard a lot about like midfoot running and all of that. The latest research really shows that it doesn't really matter where you're striking on your foot, as long as you're striking under your center of gravity. So that means that rather than reaching out, stopping my body, and having to yank everything over, I'm landing right underneath myself. So it's basically like a controlled fall. So we work a lot on that. And then kind of related to that is a stiff landing. So that would be someone who it looks like they're really like staccato. So they're not accepting the weight with each step. They're kind of same thing, breaking it. So that increases your ground reaction forces, your risk of stress fractures, knee pain, all that good stuff. Then we look at the back for hip drop. That's where we look at symmetry again. So is one side dropping a lot more than the other? So that would maybe indicate a weakness on one side compared to the other, that sort of thing. So that will help us kind of identify strengthening exercises to look for, that sort of thing. From the side, we look at vertical displacement. That's how high you are rising and falling throughout your gait cycle. So of course the idea in running is that we move forward rather than up and down. So that's another easy one to work on. The people that you hear running, you can hear them from 2 blocks away. They probably have a pretty large vertical displacement. So starting to work on things like that can help you increase your cadence. It can help you have less risk of same things, stress fracture, pain in every sense, and even, I think, ankle sprains, because if you're running more horizontally, there's a lot less chance that you're gonna land wrong. Then we have excessive dorsiflexion. So dorsiflexion is how much your toes raise. So every time you strike, a lot of us strike with our heel. If we're getting a lot of dorsiflexion, so more than about 20 degrees, we're putting ourselves at greater risk for things like Achilles tendonitis and things like that. And that's really common in overstriders as well, because we're getting way out in front, and then not only are we really jamming into that heel, we're also really extended, so we're putting a lot of tension on that Achilles. And then lack of hip extension, like we talked about. A lot of us get really quad dominant, so we lack both that extension and that kick. So we look for things like that. Crossing midline, so we call this one a knee window. So basically, if you're looking at a runner from the back, you want to be able to see a little bit of light between their knees throughout the entire cycle. If you don't, and this is more common in women because of weak hips or like the really tiny runners that you see, if you're crossing midline, you're basically running on a line rather than your hips having their own space. So that can create some knee pain, hip issues, all that kind of stuff. And then overpronation, I'm sure you've heard about. So from the back, we look at how many toes can we see on the inside. We really don't even want to see much more than the big toe. And on the outside, we don't want to see more than 2 toes on the outside.
So what do you do, right? You guys have pain. What do you guys typically do? You start having pain. Just throw it out there. Ice. Good. That's great. Yep. Foam roll. Right. Rest. What if you paid $200 for a training regime and you're going through it? It's like month 2.
Just say it. You guys push on through.
Push on through. Runners don't rest. Go on. No, but seriously though. So that's all good stuff. Resting, icing. Taking a couple days off, maybe stretching. What's that? Complaining a lot, right? Yeah. But what happens if you can't run? Has anyone had an injury to where they couldn't run through it, to where they couldn't push through it? Right. So then what? You rest. You stop. You rest for a long time. You go to the doctor. They say, what do they say? Rest.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? I don't want to rest. That's why I came to you. No, I can. Yeah, but so what we like to do with our runners is really try to help you guys through the injury, right? Nobody wants to stop running. You can lose a lot of valuable miles gained, especially when you're going through these training programs, right? You spend all that time and effort working up to this goal, and maybe it's a couple weeks before the event, and you have to stop, right? That's terrible. So what I would recommend is going in and get checked, right? So go to the doctor. Maybe they can refer you on to someone else, or maybe they can give you some good sound advice to continue to run. You have to find a good doctor who sees a lot of runners and knows the mindset and kind of all that with the runner. But go in, you can see any physical therapist. It doesn't have to be us. Chiropractors can help out sometimes too. Even some of the trainers may have some good advice for you as well. But talk to people in your network. Talk to your coach. They'll have really good advice for you guys because chances are they've been through the same thing, right? What we like to do, who's that guy? Michael Phelps, right? What the heck's on his shoulder?
Cupping.
Cupping. Who knows about cupping? Yeah. Who knew about cupping before the Olympics? Oh, same people, right? So seriously, it's been really well marketed by Michael Phelps because he has all these marks on his body, and everyone's like, what the heck is wrong with this guy? But cupping is a really effective tool that we use. And what it is we put these little cups on your body. So the cups look like this. We pumped it up, so we suction your skin, fascia, and muscle away. And then what we like to do, as opposed to cupping, is more of an Eastern medicine where they put them on little channels of the body to release chi and bad energy and all that stuff. We like to put it on tight musculature that may be restricting your glute from firing. Or maybe your IT band, you've been running on it so bad to where it's killing you now and there's a lot of gunk buildup around that IT band. We put it on the shortened position, couple over the body, and then we stretch you under the cup tension. This stuff is very powerful stuff, and it changes flexibility like immediately. It's amazing. But what we want to caution you guys from, and because anybody can do it, you don't have to be a physical therapist, you don't have to be a doctor. I mean, you guys can go buy this stuff. But what I would caution is doing too much, right? We only do a couple pumps, and then we only leave it on for a couple minutes at a time because it could cause severe bruising, worse than Phelps, and it could be a little bit damaging too. So you guys just have to watch out for using some of this newer technology that's coming out. Super effective at increasing flexibility. If you do it the right way, it really changes stuff really fast. So that's part of our runner's regeneration package, which you guys can see on the back side of your sheets there. Graston, anybody have ever done Graston? Like little metal tools or stones that people use to rub on your body. Like, what the heck's this guy rubbing on me? But so that's kind of a similar philosophy. The cupping is more decompressive, meaning it's pulling everything away from your body. The Graston is more compressive. But again, it works the same way as far as loosening the skin, the fascia, and the muscles, increasing your flexibility, making really good gains, and allowing you to, a lot of times, continue to run. So these are some of the tools that we use. Different body parts, we utilize that. And this, yes, it's like a guy with the axe was on behind me.
I have people that come in for this just for this. They come in for Graston like once or twice a week just to see me for Graston. So people love it. It doesn't have to be torturous.
It's super effective. It's super effective, and it feels really good. You can feel the increase of flexibility right away. So again, that's some of the things that we do to kind of keep runners running through any type of flexibility or injury issues that might be going on. The Ultra G treadmill, has anyone heard of the Ultra G treadmill? Like a gravity eliminated treadmill where you put these funky little shorts on, they got a zipper around them. But you step in this treadmill and we pull this sled up, you zip in, and then what we can do, it measures the air displacement. There's a little weight in there, so it measures your body weight, and then it can unload your body. You can run at 100% of your body weight all the way down to 20% of your body weight. I was just talking with Charlie, though, if somebody's dealing with an injury, we don't usually go below 50%. It's like you're running on the moon. It's kind of crazy, but usually we start around 80 to 70%. And the protocol is unload yourself as much as you don't have pain. So we decrease the ground reaction forces, which again, overstriding and some of these deviations may cause increase in ground reaction forces, but you can continue to get your mileage. You don't have to stop running. Yeah, it sucks to run on a treadmill, especially if you like running outside, but at least you're continuing to work through your mileage while you have an injury. So this is a really, really awesome tool for Sacramento. We're the only outpatient facility that offers it to the public. So there's a couple like skilled nursing homes. They use it more for neurological deficits and getting people to walk better after some type of stroke or Parkinson's, stuff like that. I think the Kings have a couple. UC Davis, I think, might have one or two, but I don't know if they release it to the public. So we're the only facility. You have to go up to Tahoe, go down to the Bay Area if you want to use one of these things. But again, it allows you to keep running. You don't have to stop running if you're dealing with an injury. So those are some of the things that we do to kind of help the runners continue to run and train through any types of aches or pains that you guys might be developing. Whew! A lot of info, huh? A lot of info. To summarize it all, repetitive running can lead to injury. You know, sometimes you guys are going to be dealing with stuff. I would say if it's something that's bothering you just a little bit and it gets a little worse, that may be cause for concern. So talk to one of your coaches; they can direct you in the right direction. Develop a strength and stretching regimen. We showed you guys some pretty good stuff here. Again, your coaches go over some really good stuff with you guys. Just make sure you're challenging yourself. If you're just doing it super easy, it's probably not going to be as effective as it can be. Screen for injuries before they happen. We talked about the two things that we do to screen for these injuries, and maybe we can give you guys some tools to avoid these injuries in the first place. And again, address minor injuries before they become major. A lot of this stuff is chronic. It's ongoing. You start to feel a little knee pain, you continue to run through it, it gets worse until you can't run. Run faster, stronger, and longer than ever. Just keep going, right? So that's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to help you guys with. These are the services that we offer. It's on the back of your guys' cards. If you guys have any inquiries about that stuff, feel free to email me. Feel free to email Leslie, and we can help you guys out in any way that we can. Sound good?